I don't put it all on these 3 races. If we were to have 3 bad races, hopes would still remain alive. I don't believe that's going to be the case, but I'm just saying we don't pin it to one race. For me, I'm not judging our success by a number of like a short amount of racing. It's half a season, 1 season. Let's talk at the end of my career here at Ferrari, at the end of a few years here at Ferrari, and then let's talk about what we've done. I think that's when we can look back and we say whether or not we're successful. These few months are paving stones towards where we're going.
Have you ever wondered how a 7-time world champion feels when your talent is not enough? What happens when even Lewis Hamilton in Ferrari and at home can't take his car beyond AQ2? Lewis Hamilton, one of the greatest names in the history of Formula One, made his expected debut as a Ferrari pilot in the Imola layout, the heart of Italian motoring. The image of Hamilton dressed in red, walking through the paddock, greeting the mechanics of Maranello and posing before a crowd dressed in scarlet flags, seemed taken from a movie. The expectation was immense, both inside and outside the team. He was not simply a new pilot joining a historic team. It was the arrival of a living legend, a 7 times world champion, the most laureate team, but also one of the most beaten by the pressure of his own recent history. Since its announcement, the union between Ferrari and Hamilton had been portrayed as a combination of redemption and ambition. Redemption for Ferrari, eager to return to the top after years of frustrations, strategic errors and inconsistent cars. And ambition for Hamilton, who after a gray period in Mercedes, bet everything in a radical change. Not for money, not for marketing. By legacy. Because of the opportunity to show that he could win with Ferrari as Schumacher did. For leaving a brand that would go beyond statistics. But all that epic narrative brutally faced technical and sports reality in its first great real challenge. Imola was not another race. It was the first Grand Prix on Italian soil for Hamilton as a Ferrari pilot. The perfect place to start a new triumphal chapter. But instead of a fairy tale, what happened was a hard slap of reality. Saturday's classification was a disaster. He didn't even reach Q3, ended in the 12th position. He was out prematurely in the same round as his partner Charles Leclerc, who could only improve a place and qualify 11th. That result, which in another context could simply be considered a bad day, became an alarm for the entire Ferrari-Hamilton project. And what aggravates all this is not only the position on the grille. It is the fact that it occurred in front of thousands of tifosi who filled the stands, many of them moved by the illusion of seeing Hamilton win at home, with the colors of Maranello. The disappointment was not only technical or sports, it was emotional. And that was noticed in the way Hamilton expressed himself after the session. Visibly affected, Hamilton did not opt for the typical diplomatic statements that protect the team or calm the media. He said with total openness, "Devraged, I feel simply shattered." Words like this, with that emotional weight, are not common in a pilot who has lived everything. But they reflect an internal breakdown point. It's not just frustration. It is the recognition that something much deeper is not working. That the car is not responding and that its commitment to Ferrari for now is colliding with a harsh reality. And there is generated the conflict that crosses all this video. Because what Hamilton lived in Imola is not a simple elimination in classification. It is the first real sign that, despite marketing, promises and new era speeches, Ferrari continues to drag the same technical ghosts that have sabotaged entire generations of bright pilots. And for Hamilton, that's more than a setback. It is a direct threat to its legacy. Hamilton's disappointment did not stay on the surface. As usual in him, his subsequent analysis was more than an emotional relief. It was a precise radiography of the real problem within Ferrari. Lewis did not just say that the car was not fast. It went further. He said that, despite having felt that during the weekend they had made significant advances, the classification result did not reflect that progress at all. He said clearly, "I really feel that we have taken many positive steps over the weekend." A phrase that opens a fundamental contradiction. If the car seemed to improve, why didn't it translate with performance? Hamilton's response points directly to the behavior of the tires, one of the most critical issues in modern Formula One. In their words, when they set up the new soft tire, there was no improvement. Literally, he didn't feel alive. This is not just a subjective observation. Technically, it means that the SF-25 failed to put the tires in its optimal temperature window. The car did not activate the compound, which prevents rubber from reaching its best level of grip. On a track like Imola, where the margin of error is minimal and each curve requires precision, this is a sentence. Hamilton also made a direct comparison with Verstappen. He said, "If you look at how fast Max goes in curve 2 and 3, you just can't match it." That phrase summarizes everything. It is not that the car is barely slower. It is that there are areas of the circuit where Ferrari is not even on the same planet as Red Bull. And that, coming from Hamilton, is not a minor critic. It is a competitive impotence statement. But beyond the technical aspect, there is an emotional factor that weighed and a lot. Hamilton arrived in Imola with an open heart. I knew it wasn't just a career. It was his official presentation to the Tifosi, the most passionate and demanding fans of the entire Formula One. He said it himself, "There is something magical. Seeing how much Ferrari means for people. I have never seen anything the same." That connection with the public is not false. Lewis has always been aware of Ferrari's symbolic power. But even in the midst of that fervor, he released a phrase full of irony, "I just need more support." It was not a request to the public. It was a clear and direct, "You need car support, of the structure, of a project that really supports you." At that time, frustration was no longer technical. It was existential. Because when a pilot such as Hamilton, with all his experience and ability to adapt, he feels that he is giving everything and the car does not respond, disappointment is not punctual. It is structural. It is the feeling that, as much as it strives, there is an invisible barrier that prevents him from demonstrating what he really is capable of. The tone of his statements was not someone who simply had a bad Saturday. It was that of a champion who begins to suspect that the team to which he trusted his latest project is not ready to be at his height. And in that abyss between the pilot's talent and the car's response, it is where Ferrari's true crisis in 2025 was born. Lewis Hamilton's statements in Imola were not a simple moment of personal catharsis. They were the clearest signal so far that the relationship between the British pilot and Ferrari is at a turning point. It is not only a bad classification or an isolated problem of tires. It is an accumulation of worrying signals that point to a potential fracture between what promised to be a historical alliance and the technical reality facing the Italian team. When a pilot like Hamilton, known for his meticulous approach, for his ability to raise the performance of any car managed, begins to show such open signs of frustration, the message transcends the immediate. Lewis has competed for years in extreme conditions, has won worlds under pressure, has faced intense rivalries, and has rarely been carried away by emotion in front of the media. Therefore, when he says he is shattered, or when he compares the performance of his car with that of his rivals so raw, what he is communicating is deeper. He is saying that something structural is not working. And this is where the meaning is extended. Ferrari not only risk losing performance on the track, he is at risk of losing the faith of his greatest signing in a decade. Hamilton is not just a pilot. It is a transformative figure. His arrival in Maranello intended to bring not only titles, but also a culture of work, winning mentality, positive pressure on engineers, and a vision of high performance that would help modernize the structure. But if Ferrari does not give him the tools, if the SF-25 continues to respond with inconsistencies, what can be lost is not a race or season. It is a historical opportunity. The consequences can go beyond the internal relationship. These types of public statements also impact the perception of fans, sponsors, and media. Because if Hamilton begins to show discontent recurrently, the story changes. It is no longer Hamilton and Ferrari, the dream union, to become Hamilton trapped in the same cycle that has destroyed other talents within Ferrari. And that type of narrative can be lethal for the internal morals of any team. But there is still room. Hamilton, despite his hurt tone, has not given signs of surrender. He still talks about the car with the hope that it can be improved. It still refers to Tifosi with respect and admiration. It is still in the adaptation process. The Ferrari-Hamilton project is not broken, but it is in its first big point of tension. And what happens in the next races, technically and emotionally, will define whether this chapter will be one of redemption or one more in the long list of disagreements between Ferrari and its champions. Lewis Hamilton's situation in Ferrari, after his first grand prize at home dressed in red, has been marked by more than a bad result. It is the representation of how difficult it can be to join history, expectations, and reality in the same project. Hamilton is not simply trying to adapt to a new car. He is trying to transform Ferrari from within. But when the tools do not respond, even the largest may feel that they are pushing a mountain. What we saw in Imola was not just a pilot out of Q3. It was the emotional tear of someone who has delivered his career to the search for excellence, that has made a decision risky by conviction, who wants to close his career leaving a mark where it is most difficult to succeed. And that path, as you start demonstrating, will not be easy. There are no shortcuts. There are no guarantees. Only work, frustration, and the hope that at some point the effort of fruit. Ferrari has an unrepeatable opportunity, not only to have a world champion in his ranks, but to redefine his future with him. But if they do not react now, if they do not listen to the signs that their own pilot is sending, they can turn this epic story into one of the many broken promises that have marked their recent history. Imola has been the first blow. Now comes the answer. And the final question is open. Will Ferrari able to give Hamilton what he needs? Or are we witnessing the beginning of another sports tragedy under the red banner? The next big prizes will give the answer. But we are sure, the time to react has begun to run out.